When we replaced the old high school, we knew that that was just the beginning. And it would be a window of opportunity that we couldn't pass up. And we wanted to finish the rest of the school district, but that would have been impossible at the time. So we started our work. All that planning had to go in. Another window of opportunity came up. We took advantage of that window. We had the election in 2016 and we passed with flying colors, which was great.
We are official.
Close enough. Close enough? Are you going close enough?
With 85% of the vote in.
56.
10,242 for, 7,940 against.
The big deal on that one is the state this time would pay 2/3 of the cost, and we would only have to pay 1/3. On our high school issue, I believe we were saying to people it was 40% off. So our percentage went down, the state's percentage went up, and we thought this was the time to do the whole district. So we put in a plan at that point to build 5 schools. They would be of different types. 2 of the schools would be K4, 2 of the schools would be K8, and 1 of the schools would be pre-K8. We also wanted to replace the stadium at the same time. The state, of course, doesn't pay for stadiums. So when we had the bond issue, we had to have an amount that was around $120 million for the 5 schools, but we had to add an LFI, local funded initiative.
And one of the things I'll never forget was when we built the new high school. My daughter played volleyball. We were there at the new high school and running into a number of parents from other schools just complimenting us about what a great school, great gymnasium, how beautiful it was, your kids deserve this. And all they could talk about was, what are you going to do with that stadium?
People loved Elyria High School and the way it looked, and they comment over and over how it looks like a campus. And we wanted to carry that theme over into those 5 buildings. Of course, the stadium had nothing to do with those buildings. It was just an old stadium that needed to be replaced. And anybody that used that old stadium, particularly anybody that had to use the restroom in the old stadium, don't have very fond memories of what that was like, and everything needed to go there. There was nothing that could be salvaged. It all had to be replaced.
So we did incorporate a new stadium, and that was not funded at all by the state, funded by the taxpayers. And we put the new stadium in, the baseball fields. As a matter of fact, the new project's going to be to move over the softball field, have everything there as one campus, and we're going to get new lighting, we're going to have new parking, we're going to tie it all together with a new center restroom and concession stand and girls softball, and should be the final touches on it. Just very excited for the community to have this one sports complex for all.
You know, you've got the football field and you've got the practice fields, and now you're doing the work on the baseball and softball fields. You have the tennis courts. Just the events that can be held there just makes the complex so much more useful. But I do talk to people from other cities that talk about our sports complex, and a lot of those cities already had a sports complex. Now Elyria is a part of that fraternity, if you will, and now there is other places. I mean, look what Elyria Catholic just recently did at their sports field. And I think that's just driven everything around our community, but I hear a lot of people talk about our sports complex as well as our school buildings.
What we do is when a district is sort of on our radar of getting funded, we'll contact the district and let them know that, and so we can begin the planning process. We always look at the district as a whole. We never just look at parts and pieces. We're concerned about stepping back and, first of all, creating what we call an overall master plan. So we're taking this big vision step where we're looking at all of the students, so that, you know, we're going to do a 10-year enrollment projection to see what's going on with students in terms of growth. And then we're also looking at the condition of all the existing buildings. So we send a team out to assess all the buildings. So those are the two main data points, is what is the condition of the buildings and what are the number of students that we're trying to house, not only now, but into the future.
We're part of the team that helps develop the project from the ground up. So in this case, Elyria went through a planning process, they passed a bond issue, and they got ready to go. And then they went out and selected their team. So they selected their architects. And the way the state's process works is they like the project delivery method of construction management at risk. So we were the construction management team.
I would say the team was very collaborative, and the core team consists of representatives from the district, from OFCC, the architectural team, the construction manager team, and the commissioning agent team. So this whole group meets constantly, and we were really meeting twice a month, and then other progress meetings in between to keep our finger on the pulse.
You know, architects are used to sort of designing things and seeing a finished product, but when you're doing master plan, it's more of a big vision rather than, you know, individual buildings.
So we look at, you know, how are students learning today? What is some of the research that we know that works best for them? And it's moved away from what we call bells and cells, which is where you have very singular classrooms and you hear a bell when you move from your classroom, to more open, collaborative, maybe some would say organic sort of teaching styles, things that just keep students engaged in different ways and teach them in different ways than you could do in a traditional classroom layout.
Me being here almost 22 years, I know when I first started, you know, districts really weren't talking about the things that we're talking about now. You know, people just were creating new schools that were just sort of a new version of the old, looked nicer on the outside and the inside and had brighter lighting. But if you looked at the sort of the general partie of the school, it was the same, where you'd walk down corridors and classrooms would be on both sides. People were realizing that we were focusing too much on the teaching and not enough on the learning. And so, you know, we call these schools now student-centered learning environments or high-performance learning environments, because we're focusing more on the student. So indeed, we've seen over the last few years, rather than it be the exception, it's really becoming more the norm, where school districts are seeing the value of designing schools that you know, have that characteristic. And one of them is that they are more flexible, because it's allowing students to have more varied experiences.
A lot of these spaces we designed to be flexible, and then a lot of them became more flexible as, you know, teachers and students really got in there and started to use the space. One of those spaces is what we call the gathering stair. So every campus school that has a middle school entrance has this large gathering stair, where it's a normal stair on one side and then large seats on the other with a larger landing zone in the middle. There's ELAs, which in architecture term is extended learning area, but those are spaces where we've taken a regular corridor like you would have in a traditional method, and we've sort of opened it up and built the rooms around it, rather than busting a corridor through rooms in that sense. And with that, then the classrooms can sort of flow out into it, and that can be a space that extends their classroom. With the classrooms themselves, there's also a flexible teaching wall in some of them, in each of the classrooms, which is a divider wall that can come back, and the classrooms can join together within that classroom and have a co-teaching moment. And then we have these pods, what we call them, which is where the grades are and their ELA. And some of them contain 2 different grade levels, or maybe separated and have, you know, 4 different grade levels. Some of them you have 1st and 2nd and 3rd and 4th. And there's a good separation between there for student safety, but it also allows the proximity for there to be older to younger student mentorship. Each grade level has their own color, or like I said, with 1st and 2nd, 3rd and 4th, 1st and 2nd share color, 3rd and 4th do similar to that. So each pod or grade level has a color, and that's consistent through every one of the schools that we've done here in Elyria. So that if a student, goes to elementary school in one school and then goes to a campus school, they know the color scheme is the same. They know how to do that. And in this district, we really wanted everything to sort of look back at, maybe say the high school, which is something recently done that's sort of a very cornerstone hallmark of the city of Elyria. And we wanted to echo that, but maybe not exactly copy it. So each of these buildings are individual and unique, but they all talk to each other. They all have that Elyria City Schools look to them. And with that, the use of brick in this sort of like urban environment was really appropriate. You have brick streets, you have houses and buildings around that use that. And it's something that can weather and stand time really well as well. So it's durable. It'll be there as long as these surrounding buildings are there as well. So those were all sort of things that we wanted to look into. And then with the metal panel, it gives it a sort of modern look and also can take it from maybe something more municipal with just a masonry building into something that you can be a little playful with. And it says, kids learn here. This is a fun space. This isn't just like a big solid building. We have color on the outside, we have panel, we have lighting, it's fun.
We were the construction management team. So our job during the design portion is to make sure that, first of all, we're staying on track with the schedule and getting the design done on time so that the construction can happen appropriately, but also keeping track of the cost to make sure that we're not going to exceed our budget at the end of the day and we can get the whole program done.
We're setting our budgets at a time well before the projects are actually bid. So we're always trying to anticipate what the market does. In this particular instance, the market didn't go in a direction that it did us any favors.
We were barely underway when it started to occur to us that maybe with it being good times, wasn't so good after all for us.
It was very difficult to predict back then what was going to happen in the market. Just in school construction alone, in Northern Ohio, we had $1 billion worth of K-12 construction hit the street at basically the same time. That was unprecedented to see that much work come out all at once. And that wasn't the only thing that was going on. Of course, we had our major healthcare systems that were expanding rapidly. So there was a lot of big projects going on, and it really took a big chunk out of the available workforce. And then things both globally and nationally were affecting material prices. So as construction boomed in other places, materials became more scarce, those prices started to rise. So what we were experiencing across the board in the state, because we were involved with probably half of that $1 billion worth of construction, is we were seeing prices from 12 to 15% over the available dollars were where they were coming in. And so it presented some real challenges for delivering these projects within the budget.
By the time we sold the bonds and got the drawings for all the buildings, the market changed dramatically. And prices were increasing by 20% in some areas. So the state only had X amount of dollars for us. We had the remaining 33% plus the money we had for locally funded initiatives, so the upgrades in certain areas. But when the prices went so high, the cost of building just went out of this world. We had to use some of that locally funded initiative dollars to fund just the basic project.
The one thing we knew we had to do was to work with the money that we had. We knew we could not go back to the community. That would not be right, that would not be fair. They had an understanding that they were going to get 5 buildings and a stadium. And we had to find then solutions that we're going to stay within the parameters of not asking the state for more money, because it is what it is. When they gave us our contract and they gave us our amount, that was a fixed amount. And we believe the community might have thought that they weren't getting what they were promised if we didn't do what we said we were going to do. So we had to go to work right away to come up with a plan. We did come up with a plan. It didn't go very far, but we came up with a plan. And the state wanted us to do this because they were getting nervous, I think. At this point, they didn't want to be blamed for not funding the program. And we weren't blaming them. There's no fault in this. This was a set of circumstances that, the perfect storm, no pun intended, with the storms that were going on and all the construction that was going on, they couldn't have foreseen this.
The state has made their commitment and it cannot go any higher, and that left us $7 million short at that point.
Mr. Rigda?
Yes.
Just so we're clear, 3.2 million shortfall.
Yes.
And that's after you've already
After
cut,
the $10 million.
After you've already cut 10
Right.
million. Okay.
After the $10 million.
And so we thought that we could get the same amount of teaching space by reducing the buildings from 5 buildings to 3 buildings. And instead of having the 2 smaller buildings that were K4, we would build 3 of them that were K8, and one of the buildings would have been pre-K8. And we took that to the board. That didn't go well.
Well, we were stunned, and a lot of information. That was on a Saturday morning in open session, and by Wednesday board meeting, March of 2018, we had hundreds of people come to us in open session and tell us no. They were very adamant about wanting the 5 schools. And the community came out, spoke, and the board decided that there's no way we could cut these schools.
So we compelled the committee and the administration to go back, and I even made this comment, leaving no stone unturned to find the dollars, to collaborate, but it was a huge concern because of the construction costs, and we knew that we had to meet the commitment that we made to the residents. If that meant, cutting something else out within the school, some of the stuff we really wanted but weren't necessary, then that's what we were going to have to do.
So I talked to Paul, Mr. Rigda, our consultant, that was leading the core team for us, for the Board of Education, and we discussed what the options were. And I feel a little bad, but I told Paul we had to get it done.
Bless the board. They were firm, very firm, and that's not what we offered the community. We have to give the people what we said we were going to give the people. And we said, well, we don't have enough money. And they said, that's not their problem. That's your problem. And they sent us on a mission to be as creative as we could. Mr. Brubaker at the time was the president of the Board of Education, and I distinctly remember him looking right at me and he said, Paul, leave no stone unturned, but you got to make this happen.
I think we need to work together to try to find a way to make this happen. I'm committed to doing that.
First of all, I want to say that as I'm sitting here, the first thing that comes to mind is it's better not to make a vow than to make one and break it.
And I am pledging to you tonight that we will do what it takes to get the job done and the job done right.
So we had to go back and get very creative. It was tough for the core team to get their arms around how are we going to get this done without any more money and without it looking like we made too many reductions. We have a great euphemistic term for reducing the model and reducing the shape. We call it value engineering. It sounds nicer than you're cutting back, but essentially you're cutting back. And we had to do value engineering. But we did value engineering as a team.
We want to deliver the best possible product for the lowest responsible cost. The reality is that there is a sweet spot that you can find throughout these buildings with every element that's in it to deliver it the best way possible. And it starts with really, really basic programmatic things on the building. Is it going to be a steel frame structure, or is it going to be masonry bearing? If it's multi-story, are we going to use bar joists or composite deck, or are we going to use precast for the upper floors? But it takes place through every element on the project, so you have to consider what's the best heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system. What kind of lighting and lighting controls, what's the building automation system. So all those things are explored together in a collaborative manner with the architect so that we find the best possible solution, and not only for that initial cost, but also for what the cost is going to be down the road to maintain the building. So part of the process of value engineering is looking at what we call life cycle cost, which is what the cost is of that product over its entire intended lifespan.
We had to get way out of the box. And we went to the state, not to ask them for more money, but to ask them to give us freedom with the money they gave us so that we could reallocate those resources to the construction. And to show them good faith on our part of that LFI money, local funded initiative money, that was going to go into the extras, we would make a commitment to the basic construction as well. In other words, we would be adding to the construction costs rather than all add-ons in terms of what we were trying to get done. On the other hand, their part would be to allow us not to abate and demolish 9 of the buildings that were scheduled, and to turn them over to us. And ordinarily, if we don't abate and demo, then they take their portion, which is 2/3 of the cost, back to Columbus with them. But our team, and this was our construction team and our architects, went down to Columbus along with our representatives from Columbus, working with us to their own organization, and made a case that the only way we could make this work was to allow us to do these things that were out of the box in terms of their standard operating procedures. So, maybe a little reluctantly, they turned the buildings over to us and left the abatement and demolition money with us to pay for the main construction. It then fell upon us to find what we were going to do with those buildings. And we've been able to be pretty creative with that as well. We actually traded 3 of the buildings with the city for some property next to Northwood. We sold Northwood. We used 2 of the buildings, Westwood and Crestwood, because we had one of the VEs was to take the preschool out of Northwood. And they had to go somewhere, but we had to take them out at the time because we had to build the building for all the other grade levels. And we've been able to now make a preschool center at Crestwood. So that saved us the money there of not having to demolish it, and we reallocated that money to the construction to the tune of about $5 million. They also allowed us to use site safety money, which is $300,000 per school. Site safety means if you have a dangerous way that you have to enter a school building because it's on a busy highway or something like that, then there's a little extra money where you might have to make another entrance, you may have to put some traffic lights in, you may have to have some signage and things like that. And we did have to do that in a couple of buildings because, for example, Northwood on Abbey Road gets very busy. We had to make our own spur. But they allowed us to use the rest of that money for construction, which was great. And through a number of issues like that, we sort of picked and peeled our way. The city and the township were wonderful. We went to them and said, hey, I know you have your fees for construction. We're doing multiple millions of dollars worth of construction, which is a little unusual for both of those communities. How about we split and you charge us half of what you would ordinarily charge? And there was a $600,000 savings when they both said they would help us that way.
Well, the construction of the new school meant a lot to the township because that was a significant investment into the township, which we're very grateful for, but it also kind of capped off a remarkable year for the township because not only the school construction started, but also the Carvana project started at the old Spiegelberg Orchard project. So in its entire history, the township has never had that kind of construction investment in 1 year. And it just is in excess of $50 million in 1 year. Is just incredible. When all these construction projects came into play, it kind of shone some light on our zoning fees and how our zoning fees were structured, because there were a little out of line in regards to the size of these projects. They were fine for a small store remodel or something like that, but for a project with this type of significant investment, those zoning fees are just way out of whack. So we took a good look at how things were set up and talked with the schools. I've had a long history with Mr. Rigda, Paul Rigda, and have a very good working relationship with him. So we were able to come up with a figure that fit the school's budget and something that we could work with there, because we were basically, we were just happy that the schools would maintain a presence in the township here. So, because that's important for our residents and for the west side, we felt.
So Mr. Rigda reached out to Mayor Brenda at the time and had a conversation with her about what was the possibility of the reduction of planning fees, which are the architectural fees that are charged to the city to send those plans out to be reviewed to make sure they meet state codes, as well as the building permit fees, the fees that the contractors take out to do the actual work. And between Mr. Rigda and Mayor Brenda and Council President Locko at the time, they had a conversation about reducing the fees by 50%, which was a huge savings for the district. And when I looked at the numbers, I realized that, not counting what's going on at the sports complex right now, counting the original athletic complex and the 4 buildings, we were in the neighborhood of about $450,000 that was saved overall in building permit fees and planning fees. So that was $450,000 that the district, as well as the city and city council, collaborated with to make sure that there was additional dollars that could be found to continue the construction or to start the construction of the buildings.
Target was $18 million. We had to come up with one way or another. So through keeping buildings rather than abating them, reducing fees, using site safety money, using the hardening money, a lot of VE along the way, good use from the Treasurer's Department of the money that we received from the bond issue, investing it and using the interest money, the LFI money, all of that money together, essentially on budget.
The greatest thing that I think came of all of that was the work on the team to make sure we didn't lessen the experience for students. That's first and foremost. So we kept any of the cuts away from their learning spaces.
So, as we finally sort of got a handle on the program and got ourselves back under control with the budget and started getting our buildings going and underway, and then we've just had another great surprise, and that, of course, was the pandemic that everybody has suffered through.
Who builds all these buildings at the same time you're going through a pandemic? Well, we started before the pandemic, obviously, but it was super challenging. We were very focused on just making sure our families were okay. That was first and foremost. But also our construction families. They became kind of part of the team. So there were a lot of things we had to do, like providing nurses at check-ins of construction sites to make sure they were safe, making sure that when the students were in the buildings, that construction workers were safe and tested and everything, so that they weren't bringing any of the COVID pandemic issues into the buildings.
We haven't had to date any money out of general fund that's used in any of the construction, with one caveat, well, 2 caveats. I believe our superintendent's going to talk about the federal funding that helped us with the renovations. and a little bit of general fund that went into the renovations because we needed the space for the preschool. We needed some place for the board to operate out of because that administration building was prohibitively in need of too many repairs. And that little bit of general fund there and some ESSER fund, that was it. For the main bond issue though, not a dime was asked of the public nor of the general fund and the state either. All of it came out to where we can actually now even finish the stadium.
During the pandemic, the federal government and the state government really helped out, and we actually got 3 different pots of money to simplify it. ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and the American Rescue Plan ESSER dollars. What they enabled us to do was nothing short of a miracle, really. I'm not sure we would have been able to do everything we did do with the building project because of how the economy changed. So the first ESSER we really just used to get through that first year, that March of 20, buses deliver food to our students and families and provide technology and learning plans for them. So that money was solely used for academics and really just family needs. And then you roll into ESSER and ARP ESSER, American Rescue Plan ESSER. We call it ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. And the ESSER dollars were allowed to be able to be used for looking at filtration, air filtration, making it safer for students and families to be in the buildings and staff, but allowing us to buy new windows in some of the renovated spaces, allowing us to put in new doors and locks and safety measures. So I'm pretty sure we wouldn't have been able to refurbish the old Crestwood into the new pre-K building, to add on to the Westwood campus and using parts of the old Westwood because we needed that. Throughout all of this, many districts were losing students. We have not lost students. So we were able to get very creative in what we did, and the ESSER dollars allowed us to do that.
We all sat around the table. We all had one goal in mind, and that was to take the dollars that we had available and somehow come up with the 5 buildings and finish the project, starting with the high school, which they did before I was here, finish the project so that all the children, all the students in Elyria had new facilities to go to.
I felt we were really good moving into new buildings as far as technology. I was always very proud of that. But we just carried it over and updated our old practices into the new buildings. So one of the things we did new was we used to hang smart boards on the wall, and every summer we'd get a new teacher in a new classroom and we'd get a request to raise the board, lower the board. And so one of the things we did in the new buildings was put movable mounts on the board so they can use just a little remote control and it'll raise and lower the board exactly to their liking. Because sometimes a young, like in a primary classroom, they might want it lower to the ground so that a student can write on the board, but then they want it higher so they can show a movie and the kids in the back of the class. So we started to think about all those types of things, like what problems have we run into at our old schools that we can now correct.
Gabriel and Michael, look this way. All right. 1, 2, 3. Give me a smile. Michael and Gabriel. It has been a huge change throughout the years. First teaching in my first year at Franklin Elementary School, and then at the Elyria Kindergarten Village, and then Windsor Elementary School, and then now the new Northwood Elementary School. Each building has been special in their own way, but so many different changes throughout the year. Coming to this new building and having the opportunity to have all new things has been really nice. Who doesn't like new things, you know? The new building with the beautiful, bright, beautiful colors. One of my favorite things about this building would be definitely having the orange brick road, is what we call for the kindergarten friends. Everything is color-coded by grade levels. So because kindergarten is in the orange area, the children are able to follow the orange line all the way down the hallway and it leads them right to kindergarten. As the same thing for the other grade levels. Just the facility in itself being brand new, so many different opportunities for teaching with our new ELA areas. The children are able to go out in the hallways, have small group learning, small group singing, whatever we have that we want to do out there, we're able to do in small groups, and also together with other kindergarten classrooms. We're able to come together and work together as a group. They enjoy being here. I can see it every day in their faces. They come to school ready to learn, and they're excited about being in this facility.
One thing I noticed from being at Windsor Elementary School and now at Eastern Heights Middle School is my colleagues are right in our pod. Before I was down the hall, kind of near the gym, and now I'm upstairs, immersed in their pod, so they see my students, I see them. We can collaborate if we need to and do things like that. And they stop in my room. I'm like really a popular place up here, so I really like the change. I think the students are enjoying their space. They're able to navigate it pretty well, follow the colors to their lockers, be able to come and access their classroom pretty easily. So yeah, I believe they are enjoying it. For the voters that made this possible, I'm really proud that they took a risk, took a chance, and said, hey, this education in Elyria is amazing, and if you give us new buildings and new spaces, we're gonna really take education into the 21st century.
Thank you. Thank you so much for believing in our teachers. Thank you so much for believing in our students. Thank you so much for taking the time to say yes to our kids.
I like to read a lot about history, and the first thing that pops up is a quote by Winston Churchill. He likes optimistic leaders, and those are the leaders that can find opportunity in every difficulty versus difficulty in every opportunity. And I think of every single difficulty we had, the core team was able to find opportunity, and I'm still amazed that we're able to really get the schools done for everything that we've had to gone through. I'm speechless that we were able to get it done. I really am. I'd like to thank the voters of the city of Elyria for having the trust in us to build these schools and the new stadium. And they really put a lot of faith in us. And I feel that the core team was able to get it done. I'd like to thank also, Superintendents Jamin, Mr. Rigda, our consultant, all the educators for being so flexible here during this time, all the administrators, everybody that pulled together. It was a huge team effort, and the vision definitely came from the core team and Mr. Rigda, and we are very grateful for all of them.
They have this great campus setting with the schools with Westwood and the remodeled Crestwood. It just makes it's just amazing how the buildings look, and the kids love them. My grandson's in first grade here at Westwood, and he absolutely loves the building. He's just having a great time with it. And he was fortunate to be in the kindergarten class last year when the building opened up, so he'll be a part of the first class to go all the way through the new Westwood building once he graduates there, which he says he's getting older every day. So,
knowing in 2016 where we were as a district and where we are now as a district with new buildings, the pride that's there. My son was the first graduating class to graduate, on the new football field, and I handed him his diploma on a field that I was a part of helping to bring to life. And there's a lot of partners that weren't a part of school board within the community that also made that happen. But just talking to community partners and the excitement that's there, you can go there on a Friday night, you can go there for a baseball game, and people just talk about what it was versus what it is now. The students that go to these schools, you talk to their parents, and that just brings the excitement back to know where we were in 16 and the struggles that we had, and now we're getting to that completion as you just talked about, and you can sit back and you don't take a deep breath, but you just kind of think, man, really look what was accomplished when a lot of people worked together and collaborated to make sure that we did what was right for the residents and the children of our district.
So as I look back at, and drive around and see these new buildings, it is pretty amazing to see what we started 5 to 7 years ago on a sheet of paper, an idea and a sketch, and pointing out, oh, I like this, to see that vision in person is a great feeling. It's definitely a great payoff and worth all the hard work to see how it turned out, despite the financial challenges, despite building schools in the middle of a pandemic. To be a part of a team that was able to pull that off is a fantastic experience.
These projects are really transformational in the life of a community. I mean, we're creating spaces, we're creating opportunity, new schools that will happen once in, 50, 60 years or so. So they're really transformational, and that's the fulfillment that we get, the accomplishment that we get from these projects. The other thing that I learned, and I know at times we talk about it a lot, collaboration. But what is it really? How does it work? And I'll tell you, from the partnerships that we created or that were created, and the relationships that we created, allowed the core team to work together. We may have differences of opinion, we may have conflicts, we may have issues that we don't necessarily agree on, but the idea is, how do we keep the core team functional? How do we exchange ideas and allow everybody in a safe environment to express their opinion and work with each other? And I think that has been one of the greatest experiences, and it doesn't always happen this way. The district was there every minute, working through the issues, making decisions, and moving forward. So you collect all of those together, and it is really a proud moment, and a proud moment for the Elyria community. And we've always said, you mentioned we work on so many projects at one time, and that's true. But when we are with Elyria Schools is the most important project for us. And we want to make sure that we meet the district needs, and we build the environment that the community is expecting. And that by itself, again, is a nice feeling.
Yeah. To me, we've done a lot of projects. In the end, it ends up being about people. At the beginning of a project, we go through this thing about partnering. And a big part of that is learning to trust your teammates. And I've been on projects where that has not happened, and that is, it's not a fun experience. And you don't really need to trust your partners too much if everything's going well, because there's no need to question anything. You just keep moving. But when you have the kind of challenges that we had at Elyria, that's where that really proves itself. And, at the beginning of it, we were getting tested. People were looking around, maybe trying to, figure out who to blame. Was it over-designed? Is it overpriced? Did the state not give us enough money? I mean, everybody was looking. But then we realized, I think, that, if we all do our part and come together, we can pull this off. It may be painful, but we can pull it off. And that's exactly what happened. I agree very much with what Ramsey said. And to me, going through something like that gives me a lot of confidence on my next project. Because we've been through it, we know how to do it, and we can give hope, so to speak, to other districts. And we're continuing to do that. And I do use Elyria as an example.
When I went to kindergarten in Elyria, and we added on to Prospect Elementary, and we were all excited. Oh, we have a new part of the building. We don't have to be in the portables anymore. And then I think, then there's the high school. 12 years ago, we built a beautiful new high school, and how proud the students are. If you walk through it right now, it looks as new as it did 12 years ago. And now this. There's just so much pride in what not only the community did for us in Elyria, and for the students and the families and the staff, but also all the work that the staff put into making sure it was the best possible learning environment for each family and each student. And sometimes I sit there and I wonder, how did we get this done during a pandemic? But that's kudos to everyone working on the project. Not only Elyria staff, but also the architects, the construction managers, the subcontractors, and also our partners in the OFCC from the state. You know, they became part of the Pioneer family, all of them. And it really is a miracle what we did under the conditions that came to us that no one expected. So there's nothing but pride.
This sounds like such a cliche, a true team effort. There were no members of the team that didn't want to be involved. The board stayed involved. They supported every one of these creative measures. The contractors, the CMR, the architects, the state, the core team, and I'm referring to core, that's C-O-R-E. It's the core group of all those players we're talking about who meet on a regular basis. And that core team really came together as a team. And we had a pandemic to deal with. We had people who weren't coming to work. When the electrician gets COVID, it's not just the electrician with COVID that goes home. They were all exposed and they had to go in quarantine. So we had buildings with no electricians, no plumbers, no drywallers. And if you've ever done any construction, even a home construction, you realize, you don't think about it when you buy your house, but it's done in sequence. Certain companies, certain trades have to go in before the next trade can do their work. Well, when the trade's not there and they have to shift buildings, it's just a tremendous amount of coordination and facilitation. And to make it through that, it was just incredible. At the height of the pandemic, we hadn't even been into Eastern Heights yet and Westwood. And we knew that the buildings had to be the same. You couldn't build the first 3 when you saw that you were making it happen. The pandemic hits and you can't then shortchange the next 2. And we didn't. I don't care what building you go to, even the color scheme in the elementary buildings of what color you follow to get to the 4th grade is all the same. All the equipment is all the same. We're very proud of that. So it's a sense of pride, a real accomplishment, but I'll always be fond of this group who function totally as a team. No name calling, no blaming. It was just total cooperation.